So I give you.
Thank you. I'm David Kirkpatrick. I'm senior editor for Internet and Technology at Fortune magazine in New York. And it's really great to be here to such a fantastically conceived event. So I just want to congratulate the Burda people from the beginning about how great this is. We have a terrific panel here, and we have a very broad topic, which is the future. So we will figure out how to address that. And luckily, we have people who are creating the future sitting right here, so it's not as hard as it might otherwise be. And about what I'd say 2/3 of the way through, we're going to want to go to hear your questions and comments and expand the conversation to the whole room. I guess we're going to go for about an hour. So let me just quickly introduce our panelists. Next to me is Caterina Fake, who is very well known globally for having been one of the co-founders of Flickr, which she sold. Yossi is your fan club, that's for sure. Which she was sold to Yahoo, and now she has a new job as a result of being part of Yahoo. She is Senior Director of New Technology Development at Yahoo, basically responsible for new products generally. So we're going to hear her talk about how Yahoo conceives of that and where new products are heading. Next to her is another well-known creator of the future, Niklas Zennström, who doesn't need much introduction to anybody, I'm sure, but it's amazing to think that he's now on his third disruptive technology, which if you've received the new Wired magazine that just came in my mailbox the day before I left, has a very long article about this new thing, which was being called the Venice Project and is now called Joost as of last week, Joost, which is, he'll describe it to us, but it's a way to get high-quality television globally, sort of in a quasi-TV-like fashion over the internet. Prior to that, it's no secret, he was one of the founders of Skype, now owned by eBay, which he is currently CEO of. I don't know which one is in his spare time, but and before that is notorious for having founded Kazaa, co-founded Kazaa, and finally settled his legal obligations on that not too long ago. So that's behind him, but he changed an industry there, I think we can all agree. Finally, Thierry Antinori at the far end is a member of the executive board of Lufthansa and responsible for marketing and sales at Lufthansa. And so we have a real-world company to help us get some ballast from our internet digital, I won't say fantasies because they're not fantasies, but sometimes they can get rather airy. And so I like that kind of thing, but and in a panel on the future, we will probably tread into those grounds. But Lufthansa will, I hope, bring us back to reality, even though they do spend time in the air. Anyway, you can see we didn't rehearse this. Anyway, so I wanted to just start, Niklas, by asking you to kind of just lay out what you see the present to be. What is the platform, sort of, historically, from which we are moving forward, and how does it differ from the past? What do you see as the biggest things going on right now?
Does this work?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think, you know, when I'm thinking about this, I'm kind of thinking out from the internet and what the internet enables us to do, rather than in like other technologies, other means. But I think what's important nowadays, everyone talks about Web 2.0, and I kind of still struggling with what that is. But I think that people kind of generally think about this as an era. We had like the big internet hype 7 years ago, but the internet's actually been around for a long, long time. But I think where we are now is that we are in this, you know, trajectory where the internet is growing, or the businesses around, the industries around the internet are growing very, very rapidly. But the big difference now is that we actually started to have a pretty decent infrastructure in place. Back in 1999-2000, we were still on dial-ups, and very few people actually had internet access. So the good news now, I think, is that it actually started to have a very good infrastructure that will enable us to see many, many more disruptive businesses coming out. And I think that is the biggest change, that we actually have the platform is in place. And we also seen that the first generation of internet companies many of them have actually gone and become very profitable businesses. So we see that you can actually have a lot of sustainable business models on the internet. And I think that in the next 5-10 years, we're going to see many more fast-growing companies than we saw before. I remember I always showed a lot of slides that Skype was the fastest-growing business if you compare it to anything other previous internet businesses. I'm sure that YouTube grew faster than Skype did, and now we're going to see the next few years, we're going to see even more fast-grower businesses. So I think that this curve is just accelerating, and I think the biggest thing that I hope that we will see is that it's going to start having a much more of a secondary impact on things outside of the just direct industries that are affected.
Well, at one time, people were saying that all companies would eventually become internet companies. Does that make sense to you now from where we sit with the infrastructure in place?
I'm sure there are businesses that would not be internet businesses, but I think that all bigger businesses that interact with customers really need to think through how the internet will impact them, even if they are thinking that, well, we're not in a digital world. They certainly will, how you communicate to your customers are really, the internet has a really, really big impact there. So I think that businesses outside of the immediate digital sectors really should think through how they're going to have to deal with the internet and how they can take advantage of it.
Good.
I've generally poo-pooed that phrase, that every business will become an internet business, because in some ways that's kind of like saying that every business will become a phone business. I really don't think that there's anything really important or distinct about the way that these technologies are kind of used by businesses, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I think that having a telephone is no more significant than how your business operates in this kind of new landscape in which the internet is just an essential part of doing business for just about anyone everywhere.
But talk about what you think the internet's going to enable in the coming future that it doesn't currently enable, especially given in the context of developing new products at Yahoo.
Well, I think here's the thing that this whole kind of Web 2.0 business has brought up, and the jury's still out as to whether or not we like that phrase.
I don't like that
or
phrase
not.
Myself.
Yes, we are kind of indifferent to it ourselves. One of the things I think that's interesting about what Niklas was saying was that the infrastructure that has been created has enabled a whole new set of behaviors and a whole new set of ways that people communicate. But interestingly, what I really believe is that Web 2.0 is really a return to the roots of what the web was all about, and even pre-web, what the internet was all about. Because back in the olden days, when you had to be a power user and you had to be able to do command line and you had to be able to write your own HTML, there were these amazing things that were happening where you had these kind of communications with other people. And that was the thing that struck me when I first got on the internet. It was incredibly powerful to be able to communicate with people all over the world, all across the country, and to be able to share things. And then when the web came about, the thing to me that was miraculous about it was that there was this culture of generosity that formed. There were these people that were contributing their photographs, their recipes, discographies of their favorite bands. These amazing things were kind of floating up out of nowhere, and people were just contributing them. And there was this great flurry of activity, and all of it was interesting and new. And I think what happened was the .com era obscured what those roots were, the things that everybody really, truly loved about the internet. And what Web 2.0 has enabled, all of the platforms, all of the systems, broadband, all of the millions and millions of people that came onto the internet in the intervening years, suddenly all of the tools were very easy for people to use. You no longer had to know Unix or any of these kinds of things in order to communicate with people, write a blog, IM with people, communicate with other people. And what we're seeing now in the case of Flickr and Skype and YouTube and all of these new sort of Web 2.0 type things is basically all of these new users coming on, the infrastructure is now there, and this kind of efflorescence of communication and interaction.
Thierry, so as somebody who thinks about dealing with customers for a very well-established, gigantic global company every day, how do you see that process having changed from the past, and where do you see it going in the future?
What we do at Lufthansa, we create new products and we communicate on a different way than before. Creating new products and it's not always working so well because of the infrastructure. The infrastructure is better, but maybe not always mature. One example, we were the first airline in the world to create live internet on board. So it's we were, after that, the only airline in the world having decided to equip all the long-haul fleet. So today we have 85 long-haul aircraft, 65 are equipped with this product. And the provider stopped the service because it didn't calculate its business model like we wished him to do that, and like he should have done that. And but it will come back. We are working on new products, so we will now be the first airline re-establishing the live internet on board, and we will enlarge the service we will offer, and maybe to also find a possibility to enlarge this product also to the short haul, because tomorrow we do not need the same devices. With a PDA on a short haul flight, you can also work, or you can also send a small message to the family without disturbing the other passengers. So for us, it's very important to find the balance, new products, thanks to new technology, to have the right providers, and to have more influence on the structure, on the infrastructure. That's another issue, another example of product. We have not the big bangs like Flynet, live internet on board. We just now gave the possibility to go to the customer to go on Lufthansa.com to download from Lufthansa.com on their, I may say here, iPod, a guide and information about a city. And so you visit Milano, you download on Lufthansa.com, and on your iPod on board you can hear about Lufthansa recommendation for Milano. So big products, smaller products, but we can create new products. And the other issue for us, and it's even, I would say, more important, the way we communicate to our customers is radically different. We have 53 million customers flying with us every year. 13 are members of our frequent flyer program, Miles and More. And we can communicate quite differently with the new technology. We send newsletter. We have a very direct communication. We can personalize some content. And it's important for us. And for me, as a marketing boss of Lufthansa, the new technology enables us to have a vision of our favorite marketing. Our favorite marketing is whisper marketing, because whisper marketing is credible, excellent, and not very costly. Whisper marketing for me is customer of us speaking with other customers, not knowing us about our products through all the web forums. So for us, very important also in the marketing way to consider not only till now the marketing below the line, above the line, but also the whisper marketing. So in a very short summarize, for us, new products and new way of communication.
Is it okay for panelists to ask questions of other panelists?
Of course it is. That saves me work. Go ahead.
What I'm interested in is recently, since joining the new technology development team at Yahoo, is how are new products developed at a company like Lufthansa? Do you have like Lufthansa Labs, or do you have a R&D division that concentrates on new product innovation, that kind of thing?
We have people in the market research looking for trends and speaking with other companies. Telecommunication companies, for instance, or people involved in the web business. It's a very small number of people, but just to feel what the customer could need or could want. And we have, in our product management, people developing product together with our subsidiary Lufthansa Technik, and they develop some products.
You know,
with some providers, but we try to keep kind of a lead for our industry regarding the trends we can recognize. You have to meet, you have to bring two people together. Lufthansa as an airline knowing the industry and the airline consumer very well, with people knowing the possibilities offered by the digital worlds and the new technologies. Alone, we cannot do that.
I just hope that you shouldn't learn from internet companies because we throw out beta products and they crash. I don't think Lufthansa should do that.
But on the other hand, you know, going back to my question about whether every company should be an internet company, you know, there is an element of that that I believe is true. Maybe internet's not the word, but given that software and software that relates to the internet is increasingly becoming a necessary tool in every industry, I think that one of the things that has struck me covering technology companies and working in a giant old media company is how few other industries consider R&D as part of their essential genetic necessity. And I think it's disturbing for the media industry, for example, that R&D is almost it's not considered as an activity the way it is in the software and internet industries. And I did hear recently that one media company started an R&D operation of substance. But in general, you know, we have people talking about new products, and we, you know, throw them. We do sort of do the beta versions, I have to confess, I think. But given that the way that, don't you think, let me make this into a question, that software is going to be a differentiator for companies in every industry? Or do you think that? Why don't you answer that?
Yeah, I mean...
Go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, so both Niklas and I come from kind of entrepreneurial backgrounds and are now working at very large companies. And, you know, our method of development was very rapid iteration. You know, this is why we have lots of betas and lots of crashes and lots of downtime on new products that we're developing. And when you look at other industries, you know, such as, you know, the airline industry, they don't have the luxury of you know, consistent and repeated failure. I think that you know, the kind of environment of a R&D lab is a kind of a protected environment in which failure is you know, expected and repeated and frequent failure and rapid iteration and that kind of experimentation that software developers, it's their bread and butter. It's how we have, you know, consistently developed software over time. So in some ways, I think that, you know, the media industry, the airline industry can take a lot of kind of inspiration from the way that software is developed, but in some ways you have less of you have much more, you know, mission critical requirements than we necessarily do. If you can't get to your photos on Flickr, which, you know, when we were a very young company was frequently the case, you know, nobody would die. I mean, and there is the consequences were very light.
The same champagne, and at the end, the brand and the people make the difference. So that's why it's important to work on the brand and to have the best people regarding selection, but also communication. And you can differentiate as an airline through new products. I was so happy to see your reaction about we are the airline with a live internet on board. For us, it was a different...
the airline with. I mean, I just flew over and the button, there's a physical hardwired button there that says internet, but doesn't work.
Yes, it's important, you can differentiate through new products, and the new products come from the digitalization we spoke about here, about today. Maybe a little anecdote, our CEO was in US on a trip, and he met the equivalent of the Minister of Transportation. And this very high-ranked US politician say, oh, you are Lufthansa, the German airline with a live internet on board.
It is the biggest differentiator that you've had in recent years, and it's a major one.
You know, the internet actually made two very successful startups in the airline industry in Europe, Ryanair and EasyJet. They were doing all their sales exclusively on the internet. So the internet really enabled them to come up with a completely different price proposal. So it actually that's a good example where startups who can actually take advantage of the internet to have a completely different sales and marketing channel. So I think that now we're talking about from product innovation, but I think the bigger impact it will have on any company who is involved with consumer products is very much how they communicate and interact with their consumers.
Right. I mean, the reason
the content is very important for us.
Right.
To be back, it was very important to deliver the right content. That's why we work, by the way, with Hubert Burda group, the live internet, because it was not only to buy the product, to build the product on the market, because the product you can copy after 6 months, but as you say, Niklas, the quality of the content. And we say, okay, we worked with real specialists, publishing group leading in Germany and Europe.
Yeah, yeah. The thing about the internet, though, is it's a platform. Everybody has access to that same platform. It's how you use it that matters. EasyJet, going back to my point about software, came up with its own way of pricing and dealing with demand using software that they wrote themselves, and that allowed them to grow at a very rapid pace. It wasn't just the internet, because everybody has access to the same basic tools, and I think that's really different. But I wanted to go to this issue of pace, and I want to move further out in the future, and I think this question may help move us there. It goes to what you were saying about everybody's in line, doing things, adding things. And in the Wired article about Juiced, one of the points that it made, which I think is very telling about the moment we live in, is that a very large percentage of the software that Juiced is using is open source stuff that they just found in various places and putting together in creative ways, which has allowed the company to come together extremely rapidly. One of my observations about the near future is that the pace of innovation is clearly accelerating, clearly. And I think it's partly because this ability to assemble things from pre-baked components. Do you think that's going to really change how things go forward?
Yeah, completely. I mean, first of all, the pace is picking up because of that. You don't need to innovate everything. You can just take bits and pieces and put it together. That was one of the big things we used. There was some core technology that we really innovated on, but there was a lot of things that we used, put together. We used Mozilla, and we had a lot of open source backend technologies. So what I think we were going to see more of in the future, that people are just taking bits and pieces, not only of technology, but also services, and mashing them together. Right. Then when you're just like the chemists, you're just mixing different things by accident to come up with something. So that's what I think we're going to see a lot of much more chaotic product development. It's not so much planned, but things are just going to happen, and not so much of like people sitting in rooms and making 10-year business plans. And I think the other interesting thing.
Are you saying in any industry?
In many industries, I cannot say in a lot of industries.
Yeah.
And that's going to that intersection when you take these things in the kind of unexpected way, because we can always sit here and look at what are the big digital industries going to change, and everyone understands that. But it's going to be interesting to see this in unexpected places. But I think also the other very interesting thing is also that how people can interact across geographical boundaries. So people don't really care about where the other people are. The people work very well together. I mean, we've done that also. People have very much distributed in many places.
I don't think it's only the technology. I mean, Flickr also wouldn't exist without the standard LAMP, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. The technology, not only the technology is making all of this rapid development possible, but I also think that it's very important that the user experience and also the psychology of the user have adapted to these new ways of interacting. And I think that Web 1.0, shall we call it, one of the things that was very difficult was creating those standards for navigation and those practices and those things that people understand. I can now navigate the Amazon DE site without knowing any German at all, because I know where the buttons should be, and I've actually bought several books using German websites without knowing the language, because I understand which button is the put this in your cart button and which button is the enter your credit card number button. And all of that stuff took a very long time to develop and establish. And in addition to that, I think that the actual users understanding and comfort with how to use these technologies has increased. Now we have a situation in which, people. I think actually Friendster was a big breakthrough for a lot of people. It was the first time people had an online digital identity. The first time people had put a picture of themselves online and a description and linked to their interests and their friends and the things that they wanted to represent themselves. That was a huge thing for a lot of people because I can remember only about 4 or 5 years ago when blogging was a weird fringe activity. And it was not something that everybody did. It was something that very few people were engaged in, and you had to kind of justify the fact that you were blogging. Why are you blogging? Do you think people really want to know what you had for breakfast? There's a kind of a misconception of what it was all about. But I think that now all of these kind of practices, IMing with your grandmother is a very common thing to do, and putting pictures of yourself online is no longer an invitation for people to solicit you. So it's a combination of the technology, but I think also the human practices have evolved in order to make all of these things possible as well.
Well, I'd like to ask all three of you, if things are accelerating, what is your biggest, most surprising vision of something that is going to happen that we haven't seen happen yet? Anybody want to take a chance on that one?
One of the things that I see happening all over the place is the sunset of the web. I actually think that the web, as we currently know it, the web as it occurs in a browser, the idea of a web page is starting to become less and less important, and all of us are carrying around these little devices in our pockets, and we go to the web to set things up in order to receive them on these devices. And the web is the kind of the little mainframe kind of thing, but you're sending all of your data out on these devices. And what I'm seeing happening all over the place is that with the evolution of data and RSS and all of this data is kind of like being broken up and put into pieces, and now you can get all of this information that's completely delaminated from a web page, and now you can suck in geo information, you can suck in financial information, weather information, you can mix and match. And I think that what's happening right now is the web is kind of breaking apart, and all of these little pieces they can flow to this device, they can flow to your TV, they can flow to your game console or your Wii, and now suddenly all of this information is kind of freed. You're kind of freed from your desktop. I actually had this experience in my hotel where I was on a phone that was actually attached to the wall, and I was on a computer that was actually wired. The internet was actually wired to my computer, and so I was kind of strangely trapped. I felt it was just a really odd experience, and I think that that has started to become unnatural, to be kind of anchored to a computer or a device or things like that. And so now, kind of the data being delaminated from these terminals, if you were, and kind of going to this kind of terminal is changing things.
Well, what do you or Yahoo think that's going to enable in terms of fundamentally new types of behavior?
Well, one of the things that I'm extremely excited about is the idea that people are carrying around these devices with them everywhere. And this device knows that I'm in Munich right now, right? This device knows, and how does that change your experience of pretty much everything? So if I do a search on here and I'm looking for a flower shop, it should know that I'm in Munich. And I was having a conversation with Linda Stone earlier today. If my device also knows what my calendar has on it. So if I want to be in touch with people who I know in Munich, they should also know that I'm in Munich, if you see what I'm saying. So all of this information, like the kind
and that will happen, you're saying?
The geolocative stuff. Soon. Yes, absolutely.
Is that a product you're working on?
We are very on the down low, but these are the kinds of things that I am very excited about, and these are the kind of trends that I've been looking at, and all of these products that you look at, you can look at through the lens of geography. You can look at the lens of constraining them to a social network. You can look at all of these new developments in technology and the so-called Web 2.0 and filter them and look at them like how do these products that exist now change in this new landscape?
Well, did you have a thought? Because I have a question for you if you don't. I mean, you've taken 3 industries and turned them on their head, more or less. Music, telephony, and telecom, and now you're working to do the same thing in television. What's the next one that somebody is going to do that you've thought about, wow, I could see a good business opportunity upsetting the apple cart in X industry?
Well, I think, everything that's kind of digital industries, of course, are certainly turning into becoming internet businesses. So it's kind of quite obvious, like music is being best distributed online. When you have a very robust internet infrastructure, using that for telephony calls and then turning telephony network into a software is kind of it's maybe not obvious, but it's like it's something that's doable. And if you look at television broadcasting, that's kind of obvious also that it can have a lot of benefits being distributed over the internet. And then, so I think you can look at a whole bunch of different industries doing that. And I think,
well, like for example,
well, I have a list in my laptop.
Give us two.
No, but I mean, I think there's to certain degrees, like a lot of industries are impacted. I mean, for example, the financial industries have already been impacted, but they probably can go a whole lot longer, because we're still, what we've seen with the financial industry, I think, are that they're starting to have kind of web-based interfaces to their services, but then on the back end, it's still the same very, kind of inefficient infrastructure. So I think that, so they could benefit of a little bit of Web 2.0, how they could, people can interact directly with each other rather than having to go through these big institutions.
What about the magazine industry, to name one that is of concern to many people here, including myself?
Yeah, I think that there is just reading like a magazine is a great value to just flip through a magazine. I think like the daily newspapers are probably much more of a bigger problem, because that's something that people, I used to see myself much less reading newspapers than I did before, because I get all my news on the web, if that's on if that's on my mobile phone or my laptop or whatever it is. So that's something, but to sit down and flip through a magazine has actually really good value. So I think that's probably not as big impact, but I think that's interesting. You said before also that it's not so much product innovation or research happening in that industry. So I think there probably could be a lot more innovations happening.
So, well, you had said, Thierry, before about how you plan at Lufthansa to do something that's very related to what Caterina was speaking about before. Just briefly talk about that. Although I said it had been predicted for a long time, but you said it's really going to happen.
We share absolutely this approach. The portable device will have more and more importance, and we could imagine that a portable device is like a personal assistant guiding you in an airport, and without having any check-in or any traditional boarding process. So I want first remark, say I share absolutely, and we are working on that. With a PDA, you are in Munich, so you are guided in the airport in Munich. What we are doing now, as another example, to answer your question, we are looking about what we say medical services. We are the opinion, with the technology, we can enable medical diagnosis between an airplane and an hospital or a call center on the ground if a passenger is not feeling well. And we are sure that with this technology we can help people to have the confidence to fly again.
Would you try? Would that be something you would want to be similarly the first airline to have on-board diagnostic?
The target is, and if I speak about that today, we are quite confident to be the first airline to launch that.
Really, that's cool. Like that could be a differentiator.
And because we have been working on that for a few years now, and we wanted to use the infrastructure not existing now anymore during a few months, but and it's also good for humanity because you enable people to be more mobile. We sell mobility. We want to bring more people to mobility. And some people, they are insecure with flying because they are not sure they are in good health. And it's very often psychologically, and because of that, we can solve the problem. And that's why we are working with doctors, not only as a developer, but also as a distribution network. Our product will be, or our airline will be in a position to be recommended by doctors. And that's only thanks to the technology and because of the technology. So the technology enables to increase the mobility of people and to increase the comfort of the mobility if they are away from their home. For medical reason or also for fun, you can individualize in the future the content of the music, the content of the film. You bring your own in the plane, not only your own food with a no-frills airline. With Lufthansa, you do not need that, but with Lufthansa, you can bring your own content of films and music.
Yeah. So, just comment on the, we talked about what some of the biggest thing that we can see. So for me, is really the combination of the depth of distance, but also that you don't need to be a big company to make a big impact, because we talked about using existing technologies that you can take advantage of, but also that anyone around the world who come up with something which can be marketed well on the internet, has all the possibilities to make that happen, because you don't need to be a big marketing machine to spend hundreds of billions of dollars to market something and have a big infrastructure in marketing and distribution to make that happen.
Your company, eBay, provides the infrastructure for a lot of tiny players to sell globally.
Exactly. So with eBay is a good example. Over 1 million people are making a living.
A million.
Out of selling products over eBay. So that's a good facilitator. So I think that's a good example. eBay is really, a place on the internet where anyone can go out and buy and sell products. But anyone who comes up with something, products or a service on the internet, or it doesn't even have to be an internet product, by the way, it can be anything, can have a big impact. So to me, that's the biggest change. In the old days, you really need to have, be a big company and have a really, a lot of muscle to go out and market and distribute your products and services all around the world.
And actually kind of using all of the existing conversations that are going on, like you were talking about whisper marketing and word of mouth marketing and that kind of thing. Without blogs, Flickr would not have been nearly as successful as it is. We built a lot of features in deliberately to support bloggers and the things that bloggers needed. And at one point we did a survey of how many people had heard of Flickr and how they had heard of them, how they had come to join the site. And 80% of them had come in through blogs. So,
Thierry, when you raised something, it made me realize I want to get as concrete as we can in predicting the future, right, in the remaining time. And one thing I will say, talking to a lot of big technology companies, medical care per se is the area, probably the one industry that the biggest technology companies, by consensus, all believe is poised to be transformed by digital technology, and yet has not yet been. And Esther, I know, thinks about this all the time and has had a whole conference on the subject, but particularly IBM and Intel, just to name two, have entire divisions that they set up prospectively just because they are so convinced that digital technology that they provide is going to transform medicine. But I wanted to go also to the biggest possible impact of all these things we're talking about, which is on the world itself from a political and social point of view, and ask you all to just talk a little bit about how, if at all, you believe that all the digital developments that we're seeing are changing the actual world itself, the offline world. Are they in your mind, and will they? And you nodded, so say something.
Yes, there's obviously all of the stuff that's going up on Flickr there's amazing things happening with people uploading photographs from world events, and we're talking about photographs being uploaded recently from Oaxaca or Beirut, and people on the street in protests. And one of the events that was really striking for us was the protests that were happening in Belarus last year were not being reported by their local media, and yet there were thousands of people on the street that were uploading photos to Flickr and putting posts on blogs, and that's extraordinarily disruptive, I think, to governments around the world when the the ability for all of the people on the street to be able to publicize things.
Do you find some governments are just blocking access to Flickr entirely in moments of crisis?
Oh, absolutely.
When has that happened?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that more or less all of the so-called user-generated content sites have been blocked at one time or another, and probably will continue to be, through their career throughout their existence when information or things that are not acceptable to the government are put on there. And so
is Flickr currently blocked in some countries?
I think it's currently being blocked in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, and in the United Arab Emirates.
Not in Iran or...
No, it's interesting. There's amazing flourishing groups. One of the things that we most love about Flickr is that the way that it affects the offline world is that people are kind of gathering. There's tons of Flickr meetups and people kind of gathering together, and one of the biggest ones is in Tehran.
Wow, that's cool.
Which is great.
Specifically, Niklas, Skype. Clearly the fact of quasi-free internet telephony available anywhere has got to have had political impact. What do you think it's been?
Yeah, so we have a lot of people engaged in NGOs using Skype a lot. One reason is just because when they are out somewhere where it's extremely expensive to make phone calls, it's easier for them to, much more cost efficient. But then you also have, in terms of human rights violations, there's a lot of great opportunity to use something like Skype that is that the government will not be listening into. So that does actually have a huge impact. So when I meet a lot of people from within NGOs, they're really happy that they have something like Skype. So certainly have an impact. So there are several things there. You said it's actually available, that they actually can communicate. People can just communicate very freely. Freely in the two ways: just free of charge, but also free of someone listening in. Does it have a huge impact?
Oh, that part too, of course. Well, what about just the final point on this theme? We live in a world that's increasingly fractured by tremendous and growing tensions, which cause a lot of us to really be quite concerned about the long term. Do any of you think that the platform of the internet and the things that any of your companies are doing are going to really help bring the world together in a way to reduce those macro tensions?
I think technology enables mobility, and mobility enables freedom, because mobility enables contact between people, information, transparency, economical exchanges, and if the people are busy with knowing other people, communicating with other people, are under transparent conditions in some countries, they are more focused on economical exchanges than on wars. So I think definitely technology and mobility have a contribution to freedom.
Are either of you optimists about this big question?
I'm 100% a techno-utopian.
Well, explain why.
I just have been a long believer in personal expression and bringing communication to, mass communication actually to the people. So I tend to be a big believer in that. I have been since the beginning of the web.
Looking
that was the thing.
as a future-centric panel, you think that's going to have a growing impact then, if you're a utopian?
I think it's already well on its way.
Okay, Niklas, do you have?
Yeah, I totally agree that it certainly will have an impact. Never have people communicated across borders as much as they have before. The flip side, of course, with internet is that it's so easy to communicate. So anyone who's like a bad guy has very easy to spread his bad messages, and the way how to make a bomb or whatsoever is, of course, happening anyway, and that's also happening quicker. So there's always a flip side of this, but I think the net result is certainly going to be very positive, that the internet can have a very big impact in making people understand different cultures much more, but also just that people are traveling much more.
Right. Thanks, Thierry. Okay. What about the audience? Questions, comments? Okay. There's a hand up over there. Do we have mics? I had an extra mic here. Marcel, Steffi, are we going to take audience questions? Is that all right? I have a mic here. Is it on? You want to shout out a question? Oh, well, why don't you go over it? Well, somebody closer to it want to ask the first question? Okay, then you can come over after him. And obviously, a comment is equally useful as a question.
So for the gentleman from Lufthansa, I'm just curious. Okay, you can diagnose someone on the plane, right? Isn't the next logical step that you'll decide who's a healthy person to fly and who isn't a healthy enough person to fly? I mean, are you ever going to get to something like that?
No, he's marketing to the sick people now.
That's great.
No, we just want to be able to make a diagnosis on board if somebody is not feeling well. It's also an economical issue. It can prevent from a landing in Siberia if you are flying from Tokyo to Frankfurt.
Yeah, so right, saves you money. Okay.
Save money and save time for all the passengers.
Hi, a question basically to Catherine. You spoke about standardization, how it made us, you can buy a book on a German website without even speaking one word of German. But on the other hand, innovation is the opposite of standardization. So there is a big difference because companies or every user who's used to something is very cautious about new technologies and I don't know how to say it, innovation in a way.
For sure. One of the things I was very gratified to see was that on some of the DLD posters, there's a what we would call a tag map. A tag map is one of those things which you've probably seen, which has some words that are larger than other words, and it kind of clusters a bunch of interests and topics and subjects that are relevant to. So there's, so one of the things when we were trying to present tags on Flickr, this is an actual UI innovation that Flickr had done. It was a very interesting problem because we had to try to express what a tag was, how to emphasize a tag, how to kind of explain what all of these words meant and how they came. So this was actually a very innovative idea, and you'll still notice if you go to the website on Flickr that there's an actual text explanation under the field where you add a tag. It says something like, a tag is like a keyword, and a keyword is whatever is represented in the picture, and it has a little explanatory text. So whenever you've introduced an innovation like that, a UI innovation especially, there needs to be a certain transitional period, and there needs to be a certain amount of hand-holding that happens before these things become customary. And I think that if you were to take a less sophisticated, a less early adopter type user, they're still reading that text, and that text is still becoming, is still useful to them, in spite of the fact that most of the people in this room would intuitively understand what was going on.
Okay, somebody's over there, and then we'll get to you. Go ahead.
Niklas, I have a question for you. I'm Rod Beckstrom.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll get to you. Go ahead. No, go. Sorry.
Okay. I'm Rod Beckstrom, the author of The Starfish and the Spider, The Unstoppable Power of Leaderless Organizations. Niklas,
I just bought that. Anyway, go ahead.
We had a great conversation in London about the book, and you're one of the heroes in terms of mastering decentralized architecture. So I have a question about Juiced. Clearly, Kazaa was a completely decentralized architecture in terms of both the directory listings and the calls. Clearly, Skype was a completely decentralized architecture, and that's what delivers the miracle of the free phone calls. What the rumor is on the street with Juiced is that you're using a new architecture that is not only decentralized, but with some super servers in major metropolitan areas, because you won't have enough users at day one to have the network effect. And I was wondering if you can comment on that. Is that true that you're doing a hybrid architecture with Juiced, or what's in the drawing board?
That's a good question, and take this opportunity to just quickly say what Juiced is also. Yeah. I should have asked you that earlier.
Yeah, Juiced is what was formerly known as the Venice Project, which is a business that Janus and I are been part of starting, which we're trying to take the good thing of TV and the good thing of the internet and put them together. And is currently in private beta. But actually, the reality is that Skype is actually hybrid. And I think you don't want to be kind of religious about these things. So we're just trying to be very pragmatic. And what we found out is that what you want to do is that things that have to do with intelligence and logic is actually quite good to have centralized. But when you have decentralized are things that moves a lot of big data. For example, Skype phone calls and Skype video calls are completely peer-to-peer. When we launched Skype, we actually had a few servers which we used as fixed servers as super nodes.
To start off the network, to
yeah,
get ahead
so
of
that's
the
the same
network
thing we're doing here. And the big difference here, though, with Juiced is that the content is actually coming in centrally, so it's being seeded centrally. So that's what we call long tail storage. So content is coming in and it being atomized, it being encrypted and put in a lot of metadata.
Got it. So
but
you
isn't that
control
also
the
because
copyrights.
the content you intend to make completely legal, and as a result, in order to protect the IP of the content owners, you in effect have to make it somewhat centralized?
Yeah, well, you could of course do, you could give anyone, a content provider, just a digital signing software that they could do themselves.
Would you eventually plan to do that, you think?
That can very well happen. So it's just more like a service because not a lot of companies who have a lot of video content may not be technically advanced enough to deal with these things. So that's something we're doing as a service, but eventually I think that's going to be something that's much more people, companies and content owners can be much more doing self-uploading.
Thanks. That was a good question. Okay, I said I'd let you go, but then there's two more people back there. We're going to get to all three of you. We still have time. You go ahead. Do you have a mic? Or maybe you've got to go to the mic. And identify yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Anina. I'm from Anina.net, 360 Fashion. My question is to Lufthansa. I fly an incredible amount all over the world, and now that I can have internet on the plane, how is that going to work? When I'm flying over China, does that mean suddenly my data will all get, you know, all the stuff that the Chinese aren't allowed to see, I'm not going to be able to see? Or is it because my neighbor's passport is Chinese, so he can only get, you know, data that's been filtered? Or, like, how exactly is that going to work? Like, if I'm sitting next to a 5-year-old girl, is she going to, like, look over my shoulder and see all the hot pictures of guys I'm looking at? How are you going to deal with that? Like, because you're flying in airspace and you're mobile and you have internet.
It's the best question of the day. It's difficult. No, it's we are just believing in a well-organized world and including well-organized cabins in our aircraft. So people, I think everybody is free to look at the page he wants to look, and he has to just to respect the environment he is. And I think also with the new seats and the new configuration of the cabin, you have more and more individualization. So you are more and more alone and not able to look what the neighbor is doing.
You know, on the subject of mobility, are you bringing anything into the handset? Like, can I book my flight on this device yet?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And can I take a picture of it, of my passport, and send it in? Or how do you see that evolving?
I think the boarding pass of the future will be these portable devices, because you can, with the technology of 2D barcode, use in the future a portable device as a boarding pass. Absolutely, we are working on that.
You know, it is an interesting question because the way you provide internet access is through satellite, right? But in effect, once you have a satellite system that allows you to get access on any plane anywhere in the world, you could use it on the ground as well, which means you truly have a global internet, which would mean that if you were in China and you had the ability to receive Lufthansa's signal, it didn't matter what the Chinese government wanted you to see, right?
Yes.
So when Boeing was building and then dropping this service that you used, did they think about that? And was that an interest of theirs or a concern of theirs, do you know?
I am there to market the product. But I take the question with me, and it's an interesting point.
But it's a great thing to think about, actually, for those of us who are very concerned about the countries like Iran and North Korea and China.
But I think that's just a point that when you try to hold back these technologies and try to censor and all the things, it's just like it's just, you can maybe stop things for some time, but people are finding workarounds, and the technology is finding workarounds.
It's all the more reason why you have to get that thing going again really fast. Okay, back here.
Hello, my name is Beatrice Bischoff. I'm a member of the board of the Foreign Affairs Association. And I have a question to the political aspect. I wrote a book some years ago of Lawrence Grossman. I think he was busy with the NBC, and he had a vision that one day people around the world in every place will sit at a computer and have such a direct impact on the decisions of presidents that they could decide what the president has to do. Could this be possible? And the press would not have this importance as it has today, because the people take over the fourth branch.
I just have to interrupt and say, that's a great question. I want you to answer, but I don't know, Esther, do you remember at your conference like 3 years ago, right after Time Warner and AOL merged, the CFO of Time Warner got up there and said that the fact that Time Warner now owns AOL means we're going to be able to, like, the people in Serbia are going to tell their government over AOL that they no longer want this conflict. It was like the most utopian thing, which never happened, and AOL, of course, didn't work out in some ways. It's a great thought that people have had for a long time, is the only point of that anecdote. So, anybody think that's happening?
I think it's things that are happening to some extent already, where people can much voice their concerns and get others around it much more efficiently today. So, but I think that there's probably just as a feedback mechanism.
Well, I'll just say one other thing. There was an amazing article in Foreign Affairs about just before, like in early 2001, which hypothesized that there could be some kind of movement toward open source government over time because of the internet. The idea was that if people just started getting together and saying, we are the government, if enough of them said that, it would become true. But I think we're still a ways off from that, unfortunately. But you could imagine something like that happening. They did that in 1776, Esther says. So you optimistic that that sort of thing could happen, Esther? But not because of the internet. No, well, isn't it easier now? Well, okay, never mind. This is a longer conversation, clearly, and you should have it with Esther, not with me. Over here.
Okay, hi. My name is Wolf Ziegler, and actually I was lucky to work with the Burda people 20 years ago when we digitized the first data bank, and we streamed images from Paris to a focus which was called Soukmitz at that time. And so digitization is not from today. But I'm speaking up today, actually, because I just want to shake hands with Niklas and Thierry, because we were the guys who made the first on-air radio show out of a Lufthansa airplane. And we did it with a Skype network.
Thank you.
And this was when we left NIB, and we had many friends from the US, and they all came to us and said, why you guys from Germany actually do this? And we said, we have got all the tools, and we got them internationally. But we have the brain and the guts to do it. It actually took me 4 years with Lufthansa to get the thing started. So in the end, I think it's our capacity and our imagination to make things work. And I'm very happy that you're here today and tell us the future of these things. Thank you.
Could I just ask a question about Flickr?
Yeah, let's go right to you. And then this may be the last question. We have 3 minutes left. Let's see what we can get in.
I share my life on Flickr. I share my life on Flickr with thousands of photographs. I just simply want to know, is there any guarantee I will be able to access those fantastic photos 10 years from now?
One of the great advantages of our having been acquired by Flickr is that those assurances are there. We, as one of the things that actually made us made people reluctant to upload their photos to Flickr was that we were a startup, and this is actually true of many small companies. Is that people are less trusting that you will even exist. Say you run out of VC money, or you are unable to continue supporting the services. And there have been in the past photo services that have gone out of business, and it has been a great tragedy for their users. So one of the kind of great advantages of being part of a larger company that is obviously a large public company is that your photos are in much better shape than when we were just a 6-person company operating out of a small warehouse in Vancouver.
We have time probably for one more question, but there's a flip side to that question, which is I know at least one of your fairly big competitors that basically believes that as time goes on, the photographs that people, which is a free service, by the way, that as time goes on, the photos that people have up there will be increasingly valuable to them, and getting access to them will be important enough that at some point they will begin to be willing to pay. Is that something you think about?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the magical things about photography. It's incredibly powerful and meaningful to people, and it's a record of their lives.
So despite your answer before, to get his photos in 10 years, he might have to pay you something, whereas today he doesn't have to.
Are you paying now?
Okay, one more question. Anybody have one? That's a quick one, ideally. What? Yeah, go ahead. The mic will get to the... Oh, the mic's not working. Try to just shout loudly.
Okay.
Oh, there it goes.
Yeah, just I would like your opinion on this. We've been through millions, zillions of downloads, including Skype, and now what we see is no more download. We see upload, with people and we see just load, like things like NetVibes, for instance. And I just wonder if we don't move from a download to an upload, and no more reload, but just load. And that was just my last point on this. What do you think of this widget thing? Is it the future?
Well, I think that's part of like the internet we've seen now, where
I didn't understand the question. What is the question?
No, the question is like we're going to see. It's been the old internet was very much just downloads, and now people are uploading things. And I think what you're meaning are there could probably two things. One is what kind of impact do we see? How do we see the internet connections? But how do we interact with the internet? So most people have asymmetrical subscriber lines, so they have a very good speed for download, but very thin for upload. And that's because this was designed long time ago when everyone thought that consumers will consume content on the internet. They will not really participate, but the reality is that people are really participating. And so we're seeing a much more of a symmetrical internet going forward. That's my view.
That's an interesting way to end, because it's quite an original thought to me. Yossi, did we do okay? Thank you. Well, thank you to all the panelists, Thierry, Niklas, Caterina. Thanks.